Hey mamas, so I was preparing for today and I was thinking about something I wanted to share with you that I've been working on. When in fact, what I realized is it's not that I need to share with you about what I've been working on, but we actually need to talk about the topic. So I have been really developing, and I have finished, which is out now, a workbook on healing from a traumatic or a difficult birth. And what came to me as I was like working on this and I was thinking about like, oh, I'm going to share about my workbook, et cetera, is I realized like, wait, we've actually just never even talked together about healing from a traumatic birth. So as I was going through this and as I was thinking about like, oh, here's the things that like happened for me and working on the workbook, I thought actually, let's instead just talk about what it is to have a traumatic birth and how we heal from it. If this is your first time here, my name is Dr. Piper Grant. I am a licensed clinical psychologist. I am also the founder of Born Into Motherhood. I am a mom of 2 girls. And in this space, I just seek to support, validate, and really encourage moms through all of the trials, tribulations, joys, and beautiful things that motherhood brings us. And like I said, I think today, I don't know what it is. Maybe it's the mood, maybe it's the vibe, but I feel like talking about difficult and traumatic birth is really important. One of the reasons that I feel like it's really important is we still have this saying that is so common and we say it so often to mothers, and I feel like it's well intended, but it really minimizes the pain that moms experience. And we always say, at least the baby is okay. You know, you did the best that you could do. You made sure that baby was well and safe and came into this world. That is all very true. And also though, what that does is that takes away the experience of the mom, that takes away anything that was feeling traumatic or difficult for her, because suddenly it's like, okay, but that's all to the side so long as baby is okay now. So what I noticed as I was like developing the trauma workbook is first and foremost, we just have to define what is a traumatic or a difficult birth. And I think that this is the most important beginning, because here it is. If it was traumatic or difficult for you, then it was a traumatic and difficult birth. It doesn't matter how it's defined in terms of like what level of medical intervention was there, what actually happened, what was said to you. Like if it was traumatic or difficult for you, then it was a traumatic and difficult birth. That we have to be clear about. So when we think about what really makes a birth traumatic, or like what can make a birth feel traumatic, is there's so many different levels to it. It can be severe medical intervention. It can be risk of death or loss of life of mom or baby. It could be circumstances in which birth happened. It could be psychological. It could be emotional. It could be provider. Like it could be that providers were not in support of you. It could be that there was a lack of care. It could also be about things that happened after the birth. And I think that's also another important aspect as well. It's not just about the time of birth, but many things happen for mamas after baby is actually like birthed and out into the world that also can be traumatic. And so however you want to define what was difficult for you, what was traumatic for you, whether it was emotional, psychological, medical, physical, it happened prior to the birth, it happened during the birth, it happened after the birth, it was a traumatic and difficult birth. Then as I was going through the workbook and thinking about, okay, where do we need to start? What is important for us in really beginning the healing process? I think first and foremost, what we find both in psychological research, in support within psychological care, but also just looking at like what mamas really actually report that they need, is actually writing a narrative or really recounting their birth story. And that doesn't need to be in detail. It's really just a process for mom to be able to write or share, this is how it happened to me. And in that process, what I really like to break down is what was subjective and what was objective, what was experience-based and what was happening, you know, in the physical world. Again, not saying that either or is more important, but what it just helps mama be able to do is start concretizing it. And then what starts happening is as we are talking about or writing down or processing what happened during the traumatic birth or the difficult birth, is it becomes really apparent that there's certain things that mom realizes like that was really impactful to me. That's when it was really scary for me. That's when it was really hard for me. That's when I felt like my power was taken away from me. That's when I felt like comments were said to me that were unhelpful and really, really slowed my birth, impacted my birth, whatever it might be. Medical intervention was had that I didn't consent to, whatever and however. But then what it does is it's really bringing to the surface, oh, these are the things. This is what the trauma is. Because often what happens for moms is it's like the birth was traumatic, but again, baby is safe or you are safe. Hopefully baby is safe and hopefully you are safe. And so it all gets lumped together. But what I find is that if we're able to kind of really start piecing it apart and really identify where the wound is, it can really then further the healing process. And so then what I've done in the workbook, by the way, I'm like obsessed with it. It's really interesting because I often think about different workbooks and I have different things that I want to do. But actually healing from a traumatic birth was the first one that really came forward for me. And I'm not surprised by that. I think because it's where there's a huge pain point for many women. And I think it's also a point where many women don't get to actually share and do the healing work because we so often, it's like, okay, baby's here, I've come out of birth or come out of whatever that experience was for me, and there's not time to process it. You just kind of go straight into the mothering stuff. And so for some reason, this was just the one that really surfaced as like, this is the beginning. This is the first one that we have to do. So what I then did after in the workbook, and what I noticed is like after we did writing the birth story, understanding the birth story, then we were able to look at the symptoms. Because now we've identified what the birth story is, right? We've like looked at, okay, this is the whole bundle of trauma. These are the parts that really felt traumatic. And now how do they impact me? And so what is the symptomology? And in that, then really what we're going to start doing is bringing insight, and you do this in your own process of bringing insight to like, actually, this traumatic birth was impactful for me. This has impacted me in the following ways. This is how I see it impacts my relationship. This is how I see it impacts my mothering. Maybe I'm more anxious or more distant or more angry, actually. Maybe I feel less trusting of the medical system. Maybe I feel betrayed by my body, whatever it is. But there's a symptomology that starts surfacing because we've identified what the main areas of trauma are and then able to see how they impact you. And I think that's also another aspect that can be really important for moms because it helps like root or ground it. It helps it, I'm going to actually say validate it. Like, oh, this was real. This actually is significant. And this is really important that I look at it. And so then what I started doing, and by the way, the reason I'm like sharing it through the workbook is not really like about the workbook, but this was the process that as I started like really piecing apart and being like, what do I want to address? It's interesting how it grows bigger and bigger and bigger. And like literally it's 57 pages, this workbook. And why I think that that's important to note is that it kind of unfolded like I think actually healing does, and recognizing all of the parts and all of the pieces. And so what I would do as like even I was going along in the workbook and kind of just developing it and living with it in my body and in my own healing process as well, is I'd notice I'd have to take breaks. And so I also inserted breaks in here because I was like, okay, if we're doing this work, we need to have mindful breaks. We need to have breaks in our body like that just allow us to regulate and ground. And so that then I offer to you is another tip. Is that once you're able to figure out what the symptoms are, we're able to figure out what the tools are that can kind of attach to those symptoms. So it might be more grounding exercises. It might be more mindful practices, such as like really mindful walking. It might be more psychological based, like EMDR, if there's really a lot of flashbacks and things that are really attaching to you and reliving symptoms such as PTSD symptoms, you know? If you're having flashbacks, if you're finding that you're anxious, if you're avoiding certain places, all of those things, maybe something like EMDR might be, something like therapy might be, something like a mother's group might be. And so this is what I noticed as I was going through is I was like, gosh, once we find the impact, once we find the symptoms and then we see the impact, we're also able to identify what is the work that we need to do with it. So when we are going through birth, whether it is C-section, vaginal birth, but particularly a traumatic birth, the vagus nerve is going through so many different processes. We are going through such a physiological process. And what can happen is that this dysregulation can actually, like, not only does it lead to a heightened anxiety and fear, and just overall dysregulation in the body, right? A disconnection from the labor and delivery. But actually our vagus nerve then is like it's inhibited from activating the parasympathetic nervous system. The parasympathetic nervous system being the rest, digest, the regulation. And so what's really important when we are healing from a traumatic birth is trying to get our vagus nerve back online. We're trying to re-engage in the rest and relaxation and the parasympathetic nervous system, which is calm and regulation. So when you are identifying, let's circle back, when you are identifying what are the symptoms and then the impact of those symptoms, and you're trying to find tools that meet those, thinking about, okay, do I feel like my parasympathetic nervous system is online? Am I able to find rest, digest, relaxation, all of those things that kind of like bring me back down? And if not, then it's important to find ways to get that back online. Think about the things that regulate you. First and foremost, that's the place to start. And so I developed a number of exercises in this process. And I'm going to say really through my work with clients, but also just like intuitively what felt right to me. Because sometimes what I find happens is that when we start talking about it, it's difficult to even identify the losses. I know that might sound crazy for people that know exactly what their losses are, but it's like that pile of trauma and grief is just such a stinking piece of shit, basically, that it's hard to be like, okay, but this is the loss and this was the loss. So I actually started developing some sentence stems to just help maybe identify, like, how did you think about, like, what was your birth gonna be and what were the losses? An art, kind of more artistic, mapping the impact of your losses, a letter to what was lost. And all of this is like really trying to help find ways that feel comfortable into the grief and loss. And then also lastly, I included a pelvic bowl meditation. And again, because I think it's not just the cognitive, but really connecting to the somatic experience of that the body lost something too. This has been powerful for me. I'm very struck by it actually as I'm sharing it, because this is the first time I'm kind of like really talking about it. And as I look through it, I'm like, oh my God, it is so beautiful. And I think there is something I'm really proud of it. And it's interesting because like even right now in the video, the last part of this workbook is, I call it a journey through. And the last part is really just the restructuring of our narrative around our birth and the honoring of our birth and the process of that birth and how we can reinstill more positive beliefs about ourselves if there's negative beliefs, or positive ideas. I don't even want to say ideas about our birth, but just like allowing our body to be in acceptance and have a new story around it that is both in acknowledging that which happened and yet not as negatively impacting us as we continue to move forward. So I'm going to include a link to this in my bio. If it's anything that you have questions about, if there's anything that comes up for you, please drop a comment, email me directly. Clearly this is something, I honestly, you guys, like I knew that I was going to share about it today, but usually I like to just kind of sit down and just organically share with what comes forward. And I'm so struck with being able to share this with you. So whomever finds this, I really hope that this helps you, whether this be in video format or even workbook. I will see you around. Please like and subscribe if this is anything that resonated for you. Find us on Instagram, and I'll see you guys next week.